Hi, my name's Rowan Whiteside and I'm going to be reading from my story Bad Apples. This is how it goes. The apple tree stood unnoticed by all at the back of the village park. It was an ordinary tree, of average height and average breadth. Uninteresting. The shadow it cast lay over the churchyard on one side and the local park on the other. Its branches were twisted away from its trunk and its leaves were stretched up towards the sun. It wasn't until July, when the fruit began to grow, that people first began to look at it. They commented on the glossiness of its leaves as they strolled through the park. They examined the unusual contortions of the branches, and they talked about the apples which were to come. Teenagers sat beneath it, shaded from the summer glare by its thick canopy, and enjoyed their short-lived freedom. Children played around it, using for hide-and-seek and games of let's pretend. The tree became a pirate ship mast, a fairy home, a beanstalk, Peter Pan's hollowed hideout, and the obligatory climbing frame. People were drawn to the apple tree, enticed by something elusive. An oak tree stood forlornly 100 metres to the right, craving the attention the apple tree was freely given. The fir trees at the front of the park remained inconsolable, huddled together and shedding needles unceasingly. The apple tree basked in the spotlight, spreading its branches out wider and ladening them with an ever heavier burden of fruit. In time, the apple tree began to overshadow everything else in the park. The moment anyone walked in through the gates, their eyes went straight to the tree, standing tall and proud, no longer forgotten. The visitors stared longingly at the apples, which seemed to remain on the brink of not quite ripe. The tree became a beacon. The Miller family were the first to taste the fruit. They were walking their dog, a cocker spaniel called Cookie, when the father decided that the apples were ready to be eaten. He plucked down 4 of the fruit, one for himself, one for his wife, Danielle, and one for each of his children, Josh and Sarah. The apples were glossy, crunchy orbs which, once bitten, filled their mouths with a sweet, sticky juice. They ate the apples as they walked around the park, occasionally throwing a tennis ball for the dog. Even Josh, who normally refused to eat fruit or vegetables, devoured it. After they were finished, they threw the cores to Cookie, who sniffed them disparagingly, before once again focusing entirely on the ball. The mother tutted and scooped up the leftovers to be dumped in the nearest bin. Normally, the dog would eat anything. The second person to pluck an apple from the tree was a student home for the holidays. Greg to his friends, was a second year studying English and philosophy and deeply resented being stuck back in the village after experiencing real life. He wore black and reclined beneath the tree reading Sartre and crunched on the apple between cigarettes. He left quickly after he noticed a group of teenagers entering the park. The third to pick an apple down was one half of a teen couple. Just 16, they believed the whole world was open at their feet. They sat entwined under the tree and shared the apple bite for bite. The girlfriend was small and blonde and very pretty. The boyfriend was tall and slim, with the traces of acne scars on his cheeks. He sat with one arm around her shoulder and occasionally planted kisses in her hair. They smiled at each other, ensconced in their adolescent love and completely oblivious to everything around them. They stayed there the longest, avoiding their respective parental homes and all the burdens which naturally accompanied them. The last person to pick apples that day was Miss Dale, an old spinster who lived for the church. She took 15 apples, enough to bake the 3 apple pies she intended to sell at the church fundraiser. Once she had plucked them down, she placed them carefully in a wicker basket where each shiny globe nestled against another. She made her solitary way home and abandoned the basket in the corner of the kitchen. She planned to wait until Saturday to make her pies so they would be fresh for the church fair on Sunday. When Saturday came around, she began to bake. She peeled the apples, leaving shavings of shiny skin on the kitchen worktop. Then she sliced the apples into quarters, cored them, and cut them into ever smaller segments. She made the pastry from scratch, left it to chill, then an hour later lined 3 identical pie pans before adding the apples and sprinkling them with sugar and cinnamon. Another 45 minutes and the pies were ready, pulled golden and seductively scented from the oven. They were put aside to cool, then cling filmed over ready for sale. On Sunday, Miss Dale rose early and got ready for the church. She wore her best hat. The apple pies accompanied her to service in the battered basket. Even covered, they seemed to emit an irresistible aroma which filled the cold church, distracting the worshippers from their pious thoughts. After the sermon finished, tables were set up in the back of the church and topped with a selection of biscuits and flapjack, fruitcakes and flans. And to hear the rest of the story, you're going to have to go on eFiction Horror and read it there. Hope you liked it.